I still remember the exact moment I saw her. It was supposed to be our wedding week, everything perfectly planned, and I was sitting in my apartment, just trying to breathe through the chaos of last-minute details. My phone buzzed. I didn't think much of it, probably a well-wisher or a friend asking about the arrangements. But when I looked at the screen, my stomach sank like I'd been punched in the gut. It was a blurry photo, taken from a security camera. The picture was grainy but clear enough to make out the unmistakable figure of her, my fiancée, sneaking out of a hotel in the dead of night. I recognized the room number. It was her best friend's hotel. The caption read, "Caught leaving at 2:13 a.m." My hands went cold. I blinked hard. My mind refused to accept what I was seeing. I replayed the image in my head, trying to find a reason for it, some mistake. But there was no mistake. She was tiptoeing out in a silk dress, her heels clicking softly on the pavement, her head down, trying not to be seen. The worst part, she didn't know I had access to the cameras. I'd gotten the footage from a security app I installed just in case, an instinct I'd never thought I'd need to trust enough to do. My stomach twisted and a wave of nausea hit me. My palms started to sweat. How many nights had I ignored the little signs, the little doubts, the late replies, the weird excuses? All of it suddenly made sense. The way she'd been distant lately, distracted, avoiding my eyes. I felt a cold anger bubbling up. I had trusted her completely. I even told her about the security app, joking that I wanted to keep an eye on the house while I traveled for work. Now that trust was shattered. She had betrayed me and I had proof. But I wasn't going to confront her blindly. Not yet. I needed a plan, something calculated, something that would hit harder than just yelling at her. I tore my gaze away from the screen, clutching my phone so tightly I thought I'd crush it. My mind raced. I remembered some things I'd overheard. The way she would get defensive when I asked about her night outs. The sudden, secretive phone calls she'd dismiss as nothing. And the way she'd always been overly cautious about her phone. That was a red flag I'd ignored. My gut had warned me, but I'd convinced myself I was overthinking. Now I saw it all clearly. I needed leverage. Evidence isn't enough unless it's used wisely. I made a mental note of all the gaps I could fill, all the ways I could reveal her truth and turn her own game against her. I was furious, but I knew I had to stay calm. The worst thing I could do now was lose my temper. I got up, the room suddenly feeling too small, too suffocating. I looked around at my living room, trying to breathe. I thought about confronting her immediately, but I knew better. I had to wait, gather everything, and then strike. I couldn't just accuse her without a plan. No, I needed her to see the evidence, to realize just how badly she'd screwed up. As I stared at the screen one last time, I felt the weight of betrayal sinking in. The love I had carried for her, the future I'd pictured, all of it felt like it was crumbling into dust. The worst part, I was just getting started. There was a fire inside me now, a need for justice, not just to punish her, but to make her understand that she'd crossed a line she'd never come back from. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and prepared myself for what was to come. Because once I made my move, there was no going back. And I knew this was only the beginning of a very long night. I spent the next couple of hours staring at that damn photo, replaying every moment in my head. It was like a wound opening up again, fresh and raw. I couldn't understand how I missed the signs, how I'd been so blind. The worst part, I still loved her, or at least I thought I did. But that love was being replaced by something colder, sharper. Revenge, maybe, or just clarity. I needed to figure out my next move, and I couldn't afford to be impulsive. I sat down on the couch, trembling slightly, and started going through my options. I thought about texting her, calling her, even breaking down and just demanding answers. But I knew that would give me what I really wanted. I needed her to own it, to see that I knew. I wanted her to feel the weight of her betrayal in a way that made her regret everything. I dug into my drawers and found my old laptop, the one I used mostly for work. I logged into my email account, then my cloud storage. I needed to gather every shred of evidence, every message, every photo that could back this up. I went through her phone later carefully, searching for anything that confirmed what I already knew. It was like peeling layers off an onion, each discovery making my stomach churn more. And then I found a string of messages between her and my best friend. At first I thought they were innocent enough, just casual conversations. But as I read deeper, my blood boiled. Flirty texts, inside jokes that weren't meant for me, plans to meet up again. The worst was a photo she sent him, a half-dressed selfie, eyes full of mischief. That was her clearly trying to seduce him. I clutched my chest. My heart was pounding so loudly, I was sure she could hear. I felt a strange mix of hurt and rage, like a storm swirling inside me. She was supposed to be my partner, my person, and she had been secretly plotting behind my back. The betrayal cut deeper than I thought possible. I decided I'd keep all this to myself for now. I needed to think through how I was going to reveal everything. But the fire was burning hot now. I wasn't just going to confront her with accusations. I'd make her see that I knew, that I had evidence, that I was prepared. That's when I started drafting my plan. I'd make her believe that I was still in the dark, that I had no idea about her little affair. I'd stage a confrontation where I'd reveal I'd seen everything, but I'd do it with control and purpose. I'd arrange for her to come home, to think she had the upper hand, only to be caught off guard by the full picture. I also thought about how to make her realize she'd lost something precious. Not just me, but her own integrity. Once she realized I had her incriminating messages, her sneaking around, her lies, I wanted her to understand that she'd crossed a line from which there was no return. As I sat there, my fingers trembling on the keyboard, I knew that I was no longer just an innocent partner blindsided by betrayal. I was about to become the architect of my own justice. Not in a violent way, but in a way that would make her regret the day she ever thought she could get away with it. My plan was coming together. The pieces were falling into place, and I could feel the adrenaline rising. I had to wait a little longer, wait until the right moment, but once it came, she'd see that I wasn't the kind of man who would just take betrayal lying down. And when she finally saw what I had prepared, everything between us would change forever. I could already feel the cold satisfaction that only revenge could bring. The waiting was the hardest part. Every second felt like a slow drip of poison, and I had to remind myself to stay calm. But inside, I was anything but. My mind kept circling back to that photo, the texts, her sneaking out. I kept asking myself, if I'd been blind all along, how the hell did I not see it coming? How did I miss all the little clues? I knew I needed to keep her close, keep her unaware that I'd discovered everything. I decided to pretend everything was normal for now. I still had to get her to come home, to walk into my trap. So I kept my cool, played the doting fiancé, while my mind plotted her downfall. The days dragged on. I arranged for her to come over, citing some emergency at work that I needed her opinion on. I knew she'd come, curious or guilty enough to show up. When she finally rang the doorbell, I could feel my heartbeat in my ears. My palms were sweaty, and I had to take a deep breath before opening the door. She looked guilty, slightly nervous. Her eyes flicked around the room, avoiding mine. "Hey," she said softly, stepping inside. "Something's wrong, isn't it?" I kept my tone even, almost too calm. "No. Nothing's wrong," I said, trying to sound casual. "Just wanted to talk. We've been distant lately, and I thought we should clear the air." She hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, I guess I've been a little distracted. Work, been crazy." I looked her dead in the eyes, then slowly pulled out my phone, showing her the photo first. Her face drained of color. Her eyes widened and her lips parted, but no words came out. I let the silence hang heavy. "This," I said quietly, "is you sneaking out of my best friend's hotel at 2 in the morning. Care to explain?" Her cheeks flushed. "It's not what you think," she mumbled, voice trembling. "It was just a mistake, I swear." I shook my head slowly. "A mistake? You think I don't know about the messages, the flirting, the plans you made? I saw everything." Her eyes darted away and she started to cry softly. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I didn't want you to find out like this." I felt my stomach tight. Part of me wanted to scream, to tear her apart with words, but I stayed composed. "You wanted to keep it hidden, huh? So you could keep lying to my face." She looked at me, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Please, I didn't want to hurt you." That was the moment I decided to reveal my entire plan. I took a step closer, voice steady. "You're right, you didn't want to hurt me, but you already did, and I've got a few surprises for you, things you're not going to like." Her eyes flashed with fear. "What are you going to do?" I smiled coldly. "You'll see. But I want you to understand this. I'm not the kind of man to just let this slide." So it's better if you prepare yourself for what's coming. She looked like she wanted to run, but I held her gaze. You betrayed me, lied to my face for weeks, and now you expect me to just forgive you? Sorry, that's not how it works anymore. Her voice cracked. Please, I love you. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. Love doesn't look like this. Not when you sneak out in the middle of the night, calling it a mistake after it's all exposed. We're done. And I've got plans to make sure you never forget what you've done. She looked shattered, broken even. But I knew I had to keep the upper hand. The truth was, I was just getting started. This wasn't about just catching her, it was about making her realize she'd lost everything. I knew what I had to do next, and I was ready to follow through. As she backed out of the room slowly, tears still falling, I realized the game had just begun. And I wasn't going to stop until she understood exactly what betrayal costs. That night, I stayed awake, every nerve on edge. I'd set the stage, made her think I was devastated, but inside I was calculating. I had all the evidence I needed, and now I was going to use it. Not to just scare her, but to make damn sure she paid for what she'd done. I pulled out my laptop and logged into my email. I created a new account, one she wouldn't recognize, and sent her a message. I didn't write much, just enough to make her realize I knew everything, that I had her dead to rights. I attached the most incriminating photo, the texts, the hotel footage. No words, just evidence. Then I hit send. Next, I planned to stage a meeting. I needed her to come home, to believe she still had some control. I knew she'd be desperate to fix things, to deny and justify. That's when I dropped the bomb, show her the evidence face to face with no hiding. I had arranged for a friend to be nearby, ready to record and witness her reaction. I told her I'd leave her a note telling her to meet me at our place. She'd show up, expecting to talk, maybe plead. Instead, she'd get the full picture, right there in front of her. The plan was simple but brutal. Let her walk into her own downfall. I'd sit there, calm, collected. When she saw the mountain of proof, her face would turn pale. Her lies would crumble, and she'd realize just how deep she'd fallen. I envisioned her trying to deny everything, but the evidence would speak for itself. That was the part that made my stomach turn, the thought of her guilt, her shame. I could already feel a strange satisfaction creeping in. It was cold but real. I knew I wouldn't be able to pretend I was okay after this, but I didn't care. Justice, I told myself, was about to be served. I had meticulously planned this out over the last few days, every detail rehearsed in my head. Now I was just waiting for her to show up. The clock pressed on, and I kept checking my phone, watching for her to arrive. When I heard the faint click of the door opening, my stomach twisted again. I took a deep breath, steeled myself, and prepared for the chaos to come. She stepped inside, eyes wide, hands trembling. "You've got to see this," I said quietly, holding up my phone with the evidence displayed on the screen. "You thought you could hide it, huh?" Her face went ghost white. She stammered, I didn't mean for it to get this far, I swear." "Save it," I interrupted. "It's a little late for apologies now. I've got all the proof I need." I let her see everything at once, the hotel footage, the texts, the selfie she sent, the messages between her and my best friend. Her eyes flicked from one to the other, her breathing ragged. "I loved you," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't want you to find out like this." I looked her straight in the eyes. "Love doesn't look like sneaking out in the middle of the night behind my back. It doesn't look like lying and flirting with my best friend. You betrayed me, and I'm not just gonna forget it." She sank onto the couch, trembling, unable to speak. I knew I'd broken her, and honestly, I didn't care. She made her choice, and now she'd face the consequences. I turned away for a second, gathering my thoughts. I had everything I needed to make sure she understood she'd crossed a line from which she couldn't come back. I would give her one chance to explain, but I already knew how this would end. When she finally looked up, defeated, I said, "You're out of chances. This isn't just about cheating. It's about respect, honesty, all the things you threw away. And now you're going to pay for it. Just wait, you're not going anywhere until you understand what you've lost." Her voice cracked again. "Please, I'll do anything." I took a step closer, voice cold. "You should start packing, because tonight I want you to leave, and don't come back, not ever." Her face crumpled, and she nodded weakly. She didn't argue, she didn't try to run. She knew she'd been caught, and she knew this was final. I didn't feel victorious, not exactly. It was a hollow victory, but it was necessary. Justice isn't always sweet, but it's always just. And as I watched her pack her things, I knew I'd finally taken control of the chaos she'd tried to destroy me with. That's when I realized I'd won and she'd lost everything that mattered. The apartment was eerily silent after she left. The only sounds were the faint clicking of her heels on the hallway floor and the rustle of her packing. I stood by the doorway, watching her move like a ghost, her shoulders hunched, eyes fixed on the floor. It was strange, part relief, part emptiness. I'd finally done it. I'd confronted her, exposed her lies, and she'd walked out, realizing she'd lost her grip on everything she'd tried to hide. Yet, even as I watched her pack her bags, I felt the cold weight of everything she'd done settling into my chest. Once she was gone, I sat down alone on the couch, the room suddenly too big, too quiet. My stomach twisted, not from guilt, but from the realization that her betrayal had changed something fundamental. I'd been blind, naive even, thinking I knew her at all. But I'd learned a brutal lesson. Trust isn't something you give lightly, especially when it's built on secrets and lies. I poured myself a glass of whiskey and stared into the amber liquid, feeling the burn slide down my throat. It was the only thing that seemed to cut through the fog of my thoughts. I replayed everything, the moments of doubt, her evasiveness, the signs I'd ignored. I kept asking myself if I could have seen it coming if I'd done something differently. But deep down, I knew there was no changing what had happened. What came next was a careful plan of action. I refused to let her define what this meant for me. She'd betrayed me, yes, but I wasn't going to let her ruin the way I saw myself. I decided I'd take back control, not just for my pride, but for my own peace. First, I contacted a lawyer to get my affairs in order. I needed to protect myself financially, emotionally. I also reached out to a friend I trusted, someone who'd been through similar heartbreak. I wanted advice, someone to help me process the chaos swirling inside. But I knew what I really wanted: closure. I had to make sure she understood that her actions had consequences, that I wouldn't just walk away and pretend it never happened. Not this time. I wanted her to see what she'd thrown away, to feel the regret that should come with betrayal. So I crafted a message, short, truthful, unflinching. I told her I was done, that I deserved better, that she'd destroyed what little trust we had left. I sent her a simple note: "It's over. Don't try to contact me again. I hope you realize what you lost." No need for anger, no long explanations, just the bare truth. As I pressed send, I felt a strange sense of liberation. I finally took control of the wreckage she left behind. The revenge wasn't about petty cruelty, it was about reclaiming my dignity. I told myself this was what I deserved. It hurt like hell, but it was necessary. That night I slept better than I had in weeks. A weight had lifted and I finally felt like I was regaining my footing. But I knew this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning of rebuilding myself, stronger, smarter, more cautious than before. In the morning, I went to the bank and changed my locks, secured my accounts, and started planning my next steps forward. I didn't want her to think she'd broken me. I wanted her to see I was still standing, unshaken. I'd turn this pain into a lesson, one I'd carry for the rest of my life. And as I looked out my window, feeling the cool breeze on my face, I realized something important. Betrayal cuts deep, but it also tests your strength. I was hurt, yes, but I was also free. Free of her lies, her deception. Finally, I was ready to rebuild, and I knew I'd come out of this storm a better man. The days that followed felt like a whirlwind of emotions I hadn't allowed myself to confront fully before. I spent a lot of time alone, just thinking, letting the silence settle in. It was strange how quiet everything had become without her. No more whispered lies, no more sneaky footsteps at night. Just the steady rhythm of my own breath and the distant hum of the city outside. I'd handed her the keys, watched her walk out that door with her bags. It was a final act, one that sealed my decision. I remember the feeling of the metal in my hand as I handed over those keys, like I was handing her the last piece of what was once ours. It was a simple gesture, but underneath it, I knew I'd taken back my power. That moment marked the official end of us. I felt lighter, even if inside I was still battling the sting of betrayal. I made my move to start fresh. I filed the paperwork for the separation, took the necessary steps to protect my financial interests, and began reclaiming my life. I refused to let her actions define me. Instead, I used this as a turning point, a damn good lesson. Trust, once broken, isn't easy to rebuild. But strength isn't about having never fallen, it's about knowing how to stand back up. Looking back, I realize I wasn't just punishing her. I was punishing the version of myself who had been naive enough to ignore the signs, who loved blindly. Now I was more cautious, more aware. I'd learned that no matter how much you love someone, you can't ignore the small red flags, those little whispers that tell you to pay attention. I work on myself now. I hit the gym, got back to old hobbies I'd neglected. I didn't want to be the person consumed by anger or revenge forever, but I also wasn't going to pretend this didn't happen. I accepted the pain, allowed myself to feel it fully, then let it go. I realized that sometimes the only way to truly move on is to face what hurt you head on. The biggest revelation, though, was understanding that I deserved better. I deserved honesty, loyalty, respect. And I learned to hold on to that lesson, no matter how tempting it was to dwell on what was lost. I trusted myself again, with my heart, with my judgment. That was the real victory. So here I am, a few months later, stronger and more grounded. I don't dwell on what could have been. I focus on what's next. I'm rebuilding my life on my own terms. The pain still lingers, sure, but it's a reminder, a scar that proves I survived, I learned, and I grew. And as I close this chapter, I want to tell anyone reading this who's in the thick of betrayal, don't let it define you. Yes, it hurts. Yes, it feels like the end of everything you thought was real. But beneath that pain lies a chance to start over. Trust your instincts, protect yourself, and never forget your worth isn't determined by someone else's choices. It's built by how you rise after you fall. Today, I'm choosing to rise, and I know I will be better because of it.